Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It is St. Patty's Day, March 17th, 2024. And boy, do we have a story for you. It's the story of St. Patrick. You know, there are so many myths, frankly, that have evolved about St. Patrick's. The Irish are so proud of their saint, and he's very important to their culture. But Bob read up on his real life story, and so we're going to start by telling you that, telling his life story.
Okay, so a long time ago in the galaxy far, no, wrong story, sorry. A long time ago, and it was actually during the times of the Roman Empire. The Romans,
That's way back, yeah.
it goes way, way back. The Romans were busy having one skirmish or another, and this particular skirmish was demanding of them that they pull their army out of England and defend another territory. Well, while that was happening, the Druids in Ireland decided it was a perfect time to invade England. And so they came over and they attacked, and they took a lot of people from England back to Ireland as slaves. And one of those persons was Patrick. He was 15 years old, and he became a slave. He was assigned to a person who then had him out in the fields being a sheep herder. And so his job for 6 years at the age of 15 was to be a sheep herder in the middle of nowhere, having left his entire family uh, and feeling alone and isolated and terrible about the condition. So one of the things he did, he had been a Catholic, of course, because he was raised Catholic, but he really didn't have any sense of religion or any desire to be a Catholic or anything having to do with religion. But when he was there as a slave,
As most 15-year-olds
right,
go.
right, they don't eagerly join a church. And so at 15, he had been there for a while, and he began to pray. And what he was praying for was, if there is a God anywhere, let that God be known to me. Let me see or experience something that says that there is more than me here in this field with my sheep. Well, this went on for quite a while. And at one particular point, and I don't have the entire story because it wasn't all written down, nor is it necessarily all true, but at one particular point, he had this revelation. He felt spoken to by a divine intelligence, by something greater than himself, and felt compelled to embrace this idea of a Lord, of a master, of a teacher that was greater than him.
I'd just like to interject. By the way, there's no better way to get that experience than being alone in nature for long periods of time.
Absolutely.
So he had lots of that.
What happened to him after he had this revelation or this experience was that he then found himself not objecting to the field, not objecting to the aloneness that he was experiencing. Well, actually, the loneliness was gone because he no longer felt alone. He also didn't experience being cold when it was cold. He didn't experience the suffering that would often go with, or the pain that would normally go with a job of the kind that he had. That went on for several more years. He was actually a slave tending sheep and praying fervently for 6 years. At the end of that 6 years, at some point in that 6 year period, he had a dream. In the dream, he was told that he could leave now. He needed to leave now. And he wasn't sure how to do that, but the dream gave him enough instruction for him to know that he could leave and how to leave. Then he had a follow-up dream, and the follow-up dream to that was where a boat was that would take him from Ireland back to England. It wouldn't be a direct ship, a direct travel, but it would be a trip that he could take. So he followed up the dream. He went to the boat. He found the boat exactly where it was. The dream had told him it would be. Went to get on the boat, and the captain said, "No, but we're not interested in having you on this boat." He started to leave. Apparently, the people on the boat objected to his being told he couldn't enter the boat. And the captain came back and said, "They want you here, so get on the boat." So for 28 days, they're at sea. As the story goes, after 28 days, they had to make a landing somewhere. And the reason they needed to make a landing somewhere was because they were hungry and they had run out of food. The captain of the boat, knowing that he was a prayerful person and having been praying for everybody in the ship for the entire time he was on the ship, said to him in an arrogant kind of way, "If you have this God connection, if you seem to know what you're doing, then pray for food so we don't all starve to death." And so Patrick said, "Okay, I'll pray for food." And he did. He prayed fervently for food, and they found an entire herd of pigs. And as the story goes, they ate well for a long time. The pigs didn't do as well, but they ate well for a long time. And as the story continues, what was interesting, it took him 6 more years or two more years rather, I'm sorry, to get from where they were, where the pigs were. I guess they did a lot of eating, back to England. He got back to England and he was embraced by his family and everybody was glad to have him back. And all was going fairly well until he had a dream that said, you need to go back. And what he needed to go back for was the slaves that he had been working with and the many, many people that he had met while he had been a slave compelled him in the dream to come back because there was work that needed to be done. So
What kind of work?
Well, actually, ministry work was actually what he was going to minister to the people that were slaves. So he wasn't a minister, but he had received that experience, and because of that, he felt compelled to go back. So he went back, and he began to preach and try to help people that were enslaved feel better about their experience. And anyway, that's where he was, and he continued to be there for a long time. So he became a saint as a result of his willingness to give up the life that he'd been living, to live in poverty, to live as a slave, to help people embrace a higher power, a greater a divine intelligence, or God as we know him. And so that's the story. Why I'm sharing that story is partly because it's St. Patrick's Day, but there's some interesting lessons in that story too that I think are worth paying attention to. He was enslaved by a condition, and what I'd like to suggest is that we're often enslaved by conditions, not by life itself. That is, life does not enslave us, but the conditions that we're in, as we perceive them, have the ability to have us feel that we are imprisoned. And what I'm thinking today is that, or the question I'm asking today is, how many of us have been enslaved by, or are enslaved currently, by our mental condition, and that is the view we have of the condition that we're in, not who it is we really are. And are we,
what our possibilities are.
yes, or are we actually enslaved, or are we allowing ourselves to be enslaved by a mental picture that we have of a mental prison that doesn't exist except in our consciousness, except as an idea? And so what if we had a greater idea? What if we were to look at the bondage that we feel that we are in from the perspective of it's a condition and I'm not a condition? And that's a huge lesson. Now, there's several parts to that are important. One is that he is taken from everything that has had value for him and moved to another location. How many of us have been taken from the things that we value, our home, we have left, and are stranded, or at least we feel stranded in some other place where actually we have a divine opportunity, or we have what he did, which is a feeling of loss that he harbored and nurtured and felt a part of and connected to, that was so painful that he couldn't stand
Felt
it anymore.
imprisoned by.
Yes, and so what ends up happening is he's imprisoned again by the condition. And so, but the leaving was important. On a boat, which is interesting, you could call it the sea of emotion, the sea of feeling that he was traveling on, that caused him to feel, as sad as he did and have as difficult time as he did. He was surrounded by people he didn't know. He was surrounded by things he didn't know. Well, that happens to all of us. And he made friends with that. He made an agreement to somehow make that work for him, and it worked. He also did something that we talk about all the time, which is to identify with something greater than us. I call it divine intelligence that's operating in and through me and in and through each of us, as opposed to, there is nothing because I've lost my family. There's nothing because I don't have my church, or I don't have my people, I don't have whatever. And so his willingness to embrace something greater allowed him to have something greater happen to him.
Exactly. And as Bob says, we all can become imprisoned by our own belief system, our own belief that we're powerless. We cannot change a circumstance that we're experiencing. And our teaching is that, oh, yes, you can. Yes, you can, with the power greater than you are, that you are part of. And as you accept the idea that all things are possible for God, then also all things are possible for you, if you can believe it. And so I'd like you to examine what areas of your life you might feel stifled by, like you can't change them. They make you unhappy. They could be in the area of health. They could be in the area of wealth. It can be in the area of happiness. And take a look at what you might be saying to yourself about how impossible it is to change your circumstance. Because what St. Patrick believed is all things are possible for God. Mm-hmm. All things are possible. And we believe that too. And we believe, therefore, all things are possible with us because of our connection with God, because we are one with that source. It's not that I tend to use the word connection, and one of my teachers has corrected me and say, no, it's not that we're just connected to it. It's that we're one with it.
Yeah.
We are integrally a part of it. And Bob and I were watching an interesting series on Netflix. I think it's called How to Change Your Mind.
Yeah.
And it's all about the wonderful effects that are a wonderful healing that is happening with all kinds of particularly mental problems
The psychedelics.
with psychedelics.
And we're not recommending them.
Yeah, and we're not going to say which ones are natural or man-made, whatever, but and they're experimenting with all of them in Johns Hopkins University. These are approved therapies and are being used now, and I think will continue to be much more used in the future for PTSD, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. How wonderful results with addictions with this, because what people experience with it is a loss of the borders of their ego themselves. And they realize and they experience, you might call it hallucination, but they experience being one with everything, all the energy of the world. One man said he became a tree, and as a tree, he experienced all the different seasons and how that felt for a tree. And then he became himself again. And when he came back after having a glorious experience of feeling one with all life, they all say that after this experience, they are no longer afraid of death, because they know that they are more than this human body.
And that's the is that we are more than, and to know that we are more than our frame of reference. You could argue that many of the current views we have of our world are actually hallucinations. And we're living a hallucination. And I thought back of St. Patrick, and I thought, what if he had not had this happen? He could have lived a relatively contented, ordinary life that he wouldn't have objected to, because there was nothing in it that was so objectionable that would have him want to search out something greater. And so you could argue that some of our greatest difficulties, some of the hardest times that we meet, are invitations for us to step out of that and to step into something greater.
Yes, and one thing I want to say about this adopting an idea that you can experience or have more than you are right now is the idea that you don't have to know how.
Yeah.
You know, that's what stops most of us with, well, I have to figure out with my rational mind how I could achieve this or how I could do this. And you don't. We leave the how to God, to the infinite intelligence that knows everything. Things happen serendipitously. The law of attraction comes into place, and you will come up with ideas of how. But you start with the what. What is it? Because we tend to let ourselves get imprisoned by what we believe is possible. So we'd like for you to consider what you might open up your possibility thinking to. And I have a couple of quotes I wanted to share. One is by Emmett Fox. Emmett Fox was a very popular teacher a generation or two ago who was with Divine Science. And he says, whenever we feel as though we're in bondage or a situation that seems impossible, we can rise above it, no matter what the outer appearance may be, no matter how difficult it may seem, if we turn and keep our thoughts on God. Another word for God is good, so keep our thoughts on good. And Gary Zukav, who wrote The Seed of the Soul, and that's where this quote comes from. Feel your intentions in your heart. Feel not what your mind tells you, but what your heart tells you. Rather than serve the fake gods of your mind, serve your heart, the real God. You will not find God in your intellect. Divine intelligence is in the heart. So, yes, you want to say something?
Well, and I don't know if any of you have seen this. If you haven't seen it, you might want to go to Netflix and look it up, or any of the services that you use. It's a Shawshank Redemption. And I
yeah,
want to
a
mention
movie.
that movie because it's a very powerful movie. It's not altogether enjoyable at all times, but it's a very powerful movie.
And Shawshank was the name of
The prison,
the prison.
right? And Morgan Freeman is one of the prisoners, and I don't know the name of the actor who played the other prisoner. It's really a story of two people in prison together. The one prisoner, he's making a plan to escape. He's an accountant, and so he does all the accounting for the prison warden, and he's meticulous in all of this. So while he's doing this, he is not a prisoner. He is a person planning on the life that he's going to be living when he's not there. Morgan,
An escape.
right? He's planning his escape.
Oops.
He's clearly not going to be a prisoner. He's not a prisoner anymore. And Morgan Freeman, who's serving right along with him, who becomes a friend of his, is serving what looks like a life sentence, and he is suffering enormously. He's suffering because he knows that this is his forever life, that he's never going to get out. He's been before the board a number of times, and he never gets allowed to leave. So he's settled for this. What I want us to pay attention to in this story is how Morgan Freeman is suffering daily, and his best friend is not, and they're in the same prison sitting next to each other. Here's the part that's really interesting. The one who's been planning his escape, he does in fact makes his escape, and he goes to another place, to some other place, Mexico, I guess it is. Yeah, he goes to Mexico and he's on the beach, and he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. The visual thing that he had come up with is exactly what he did. And so he invites Morgan Freeman when he gets out. He says, "Come join me." And Morgan Freeman can't imagine getting out, so he continues to suffer. And then at some point, he gives up the suffering. And when he meets before the board, which is really interesting, he says, "Do whatever you want to do to me. Do whatever you need. I'm no longer going to argue to get out of this. I'm no longer going to fight to be released. I'm going to be here until you say I can go, and I'll go." So they release him. He's terrified. He is terrified of being free because, and this is the part that I want to share that's interesting, he has become so comfortable with being imprisoned that as much as he hates it, it's his home. It's where he lives. How many of us,
That's what he knows.
yeah, how many of us have become comfortable with our own prison to the point where we're not willing to leave it or change it because it's not good, but it's what we know. He does leave, finally gets on the bus, and you hear him saying, "Oh my God, I'm doing this. This is going to work." And I'm looking around and I'm seeing the world. He's traveling much like St. Patrick did. He finally ends up at the beach, and you see the two of them get together and join. It's a wonderful conclusion. Morgan Freeman is suffering the same thing we all suffer when we give up the idea of a better life and give up doing anything to move in the direction of that.
Exactly. Exactly. And we teach this in our classes, and we've all experienced, everyone who's had a class has experienced breakthroughs in their life. And we have a class coming up that Dr. Pamela Gray has written a book and edited a book. I'm going to go to screen shares, honey. Yeah. So I want to tell you about these upcoming classes that she and I are doing together on Zoom, and another minister is going to be doing the Zoom so that we can break out in dyads and have people actually discuss how they can increase their personal happiness. This is taking place in just a week or so, March 23rd. And then the next month in April, we'll be focusing on creative self-expression, how you can increase your own creativity and expression. The next month in May will be health and well-being, and the last one in June will be living richly. So each of these classes is a 3-hour class with Dr. Pamela Gray and I teaching, and Reverend KT Rox Bugatti doing the Zoom. And you can register at poweryourdecisions.com/workshop. These classes are $99 each. And if you do all three, there's a 15% discount. So it's down to $335 for all four. So
Before we leave, let's go ahead and at least mention that for those of you that come here on a regular basis, you already know that we are here for you, but we're also here because of you, and that you support us. And as a result of your support, we can continue to do this ministry. So we invite you, if you feel comfortable or you feel able to support this ministry by connecting with our website. You want to share that?
Yes, the website is cslpalmbeaches.org. Here it is right here, cslpalmbeaches.org. And when you go there, you'll see a button here that says ways to donate. There's also information on the classes. This class that we have over here is on this area. And we invite you to support the ministry and to support the classes and benefit from the classes. They are life-changing, as Bob and I know personally.
Definitely. So let's say together to support the giving, not just for us, but for you as well. My investment today is made with the full realization that God
is
is the source of my supply and returns it to me enriched and multiplied, and so it is. So we're back to you all, and
Stop recording.
we're going to stop recording here. Okay.